My name is Calum Arthur, and I'm having a close look over at the translators to make sure that I'm speaking clearly in Scottish, so it can get translated from Scottish to English to French to German, hopefully. So you'll see me looking over there from time to time to make sure I'm not speaking too much Scotland, so good. You'll keep me right. Okay, well, thank you. It's a great privilege to be here today to speak to you guys today. It's an incredible place. I like to sort of, when I go somewhere new, just to have a look around and to get a feel for the place. And there is something really special going on here. You know, the environment, the scenery, the views, it's pretty inspirational, you know, and it's something that's quite good. And I feel a real privilege to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about my research into transformational leadership. My background is with the military, sports, and business. And a lot of what my research is looking to do is to try and identify what it is that makes great leadership. Okay, what is it that differentiates great leaders and average leaders? What is it that elevates from a coaching and a leadership perspective people to that higher level? And it's an incredibly difficult thing to research, but very much a privilege. And one of the areas that we look at is that I'm actually, when I'm talking to sort of coaches and leaders in the military and business, but especially sport coaches, your job, you don't need me to tell you this, is incredibly difficult. You have an incredible amount of different roles that you need to try and accomplish to a very high level simultaneously. You know, your roles can range from management to financial to pastoral care to motivation to instruction to groups to pressures. It's just that list just goes on and on and on and on. And all I'm going to talk about today is just one part of that list. So I hope you bear with me with that. I'm going to speak to the motivational or the psychological aspects of your particular job. So that is the motivation of athletes, how to build teams, and what behaviors that you do as coaches that can help to create that extra level of motivation. One of the things that we try and do is that psychology and motivation is an incredibly complex phenomenon. Okay, I spend a great deal of my time studying it and trying to examine and delineate exactly what it is that creates high levels of motivation and effort and all those types of things. And one of my jobs as a researcher is to try and make very complex things relatively simple. Okay? The world is complex enough, and there's a lot of very complicated theories out there that try and explain what is happening. And there's an incredible amount of information, and what I'm going to try and do is to try and just select some key bits that we can work on today in tomorrow's session. So the way this is going to work is that we're going to have two sessions. The first session today, we're going to talk about theory. Yeah, we're going to talk about one particular theory that I spend a lot of time researching, transformational leadership theory, where we talk a little bit about what it is. Okay, what does it look like? Then we're going to talk about what it does. You know, what effect does it have on people when you're leading in a transformational way? What sort of things would you want to see in your athletes from the psychological perspectives and from the effort and motivation and the decisions that they make? We're also, I believe that last year we talked about Carol Dweck's growth mindset and how people can have fixed and malleable mindsets as a view on motivation. So we spend a little bit of time linking those two theories together, okay, either from the coach's growth mindset and from the athlete's growth mindset. Then really important, okay, we want to actually, if we want to measure people on this, on their ability as leaders, we need to actually know how to measure. How do we measure leadership abilities? How do we actually get to sort of measure some sort of capacity of that leadership aspect? And so we're going to spend a little bit of time on how we try to do this in our research and in the different places, the labs that we work in. And then lastly, very important, it's all very well talking about leadership and talking about these inspirational capacities and the ability to inspire people, but the most important question after all those is, can it be trained? Can people actually raise their levels of those specific behaviors? And what does the research say? And what are some of the challenges to training this? So today's session, the next 45 minutes is going to be quite theoretical, and I apologize for that. It's going to be a lot of me talking at you, and hopefully you won't get too bored during the session. And we try and keep you entertained as much as possible. Then tomorrow, what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and sort of marry up the research in your particular experience, because as we go through the research, you'll very quickly realize there's probably not a lot that's been done in your particular context in your sport. And one of the things about leadership that makes it very, very complicated is it's different for everybody, every context, and every level. So when I say that it's complicated and you've got a very difficult job, I truly mean that. It is that way. But tomorrow, what we're going to try and do is take some bits from the literature and try and apply that to your context. Okay, so it's going to be more of an application, and we involve you more in trying to get your knowledge and your contextual awareness and see if we can find some ways to actually incorporate some of these ideas into your coaching methods. Okay. So, and we present some models at first. I know you've got the notes there. And this is a useful way to think about leadership and coaching. Because remember, the caveat I've got that we're doing here is that we want to really pinpoint the behaviors that you do as coaches when you're in a leadership role. So leadership is more we're going to view as a behavior that you do in different situations. Hopefully that will come clear when we talk through this model. So who we start with? Okay, obviously the leader, that is you, the coach, who you are, your personality, your experiences, and your views on coaching. Okay, so this is going to impact your behaviors. There's a whole raft of other things in there as well, but that's the sort of starting place. We start with you as the coach, your likes, your dislikes, your views, your general philosophy about the world and about people. And that influences how you behave. So your thoughts, your beliefs, your personality influences what you do, how you communicate with your athletes, your verbal communication, your non-verbal communication, how you set up training and all those sorts of things. So your beliefs, and they'll form from your experiences as an athlete in sport probably, and your experiences from your coaches. And that impacts your behaviors. And then your behaviors then have a direct impact on your athlete's cognitions. Essentially, what the athlete sees and hears you do. Yeah, so your behaviors are picked up by the athlete, and there can be a disconnect. You know, I as a leader or as a coach could be thinking, well, I'm doing something like this. This is what the achievement over here is. But the athlete over here might see something totally different. Yeah, they might not pick up on what you're trying to do, so it goes through their filter, okay? Another complexity. Then the athlete, that then impacts, I've put emotions up here, but it's just basically their general psychology. It impacts how they feel, what they feel about what you say and do, how it impacts their emotions, how it impacts their psychology, how it impacts their motivation, okay? And then that then results in some sort of behavior. Yeah, results in some sort of behavior, some sort of action. So we're just trying to break this process down a little bit. We're trying to deconstruct it so then we can get in about it and actually try and unravel some of the complexities in there. And then simplify this. So it goes through that process. Essentially, we've got one bit, who you are and what you do. Second bit is what that effect that has on athlete motivation. Okay, and this little sign up here, basically, this is on all the slides, just a reminder of this is a leader, this is you, this is a psychology of the athletes, this is athlete behavior. It's just a real simple model, so what you do impacts those aspects of it. Okay, so now we're going to park that to the side a little bit. That's just a caveat before we move on to the next stage, that basic process of what you do impacts the athlete's motivation, how you speak to them, how they behave. So this is the model that we developed within the British military that looks at like the high performance model, because military trainers, like coaches, have very multiple roles. Yeah, they have lots of different things needing to do simultaneously, not too dissimilar to the sport coach. And what we tried to do from a behavioral point of view, this is your behaviors, and we try to differentiate what is leadership, what is coaching, what is instructing. Okay? This model is about focus purely at the athlete. It's not looking at the stakeholders and the external world. This is a purely athlete-focused model. So this is about trying to put behaviors in categories. Today, we're only going to look at, and then obviously these different bits impact on follower outcomes. And we just, part of leadership about the vision that we'll talk about a little bit, and what kind of binds it together is that the strap line of creating environments where elite performance is inevitable. Whatever that is, that's kind of the vision, the values, the ethos, something behind there. It's like that sort of drive that ties everything together. So this was kind of what we came up with when we were developing this. All we're going to focus on for this next 45 minutes in tomorrow's session is this top aspect here. Okay, so when we talk about leadership, we're actually going to talk about transformational leadership. And then everything downstream of here is the follower or team outcomes. Yeah, so it's similar to the model we just had on the previous page, but we've just went into a little bit more detail. And then we're going to talk about the vision, support, and challenge model that we've developed. Okay. So I hope that's kind of given a little bit of a platform about how we might move these things on a little bit. So transformational leadership, what is it? Well, Bass in 1985, his seminal works, Leadership Beyond Expectations, he brought on Robert Burns's work in 1978 in political leadership. Yeah, so he built on the theory, and essentially what Bass did was bring those concepts into the business world, into the organizational psychology. So essentially, how they went about doing this was they looked at the greatest leaders, yeah, and they tried to identify what it was that made them different. What did they do and say that differentiated them from the average people? So they did a lot of work on this, so we don't have to, but we can benefit from that, which is great. We also have to modify it to our context, and we'll come on to that in a second. So essentially, the primary bit that makes it quite useful is it's a behavioral approach. Okay, it's not a personality-driven approach. Essentially, at its core, it says that if you enact these behaviors, you can become transformational. Okay? It's proposed to stimulate people to invest efforts beyond expectations or beyond the realization of rewards or the avoidance of punishment. Yeah, so essentially, in organizational psychology, the reward and punishment govern behavior. Really important, fundamental part of leadership and motivation. It's often not discussed as much as it probably should be. It's a fundamental bit to motivation, is reward and punishment and how you do that. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide, about some of the nuances in reward and punishment. But what they noticed was, yeah, those leaders did use reward and punishment, but they did something different. They did something that was a bit different from that, is that they used that as a base, and then they tried to Activate the followers' higher order needs. Yeah, so that's their sense of self-worth, the fuller person, to try and engage them in that whole process. So reward and punishment is a very effective motivator. Suffice that you get the rewards right and the punishments right. That's how business works. You get a bonus, you get withdrawal, you get sacked from your business. That's a fundamental part of what happens. But it'll only get you to a certain level. It'll get you to this point where you achieve the reward, then effort stops, or it'll stop this behavior where you don't get punished, but it won't get you above and beyond. And obviously, elite performance has to involve above and beyond that level. So the other bit of it, performance beyond expectations. So, followers who are led by these transformational leaders, they put in efforts beyond what they normally expected to do. They accomplish more than they thought was originally possible. Inspires followers to transcend their own self-interest for the greater good. So this is about the collective spirit, about, we're working for a greater good, that we've got the values that bind our team together, that bind our sport together, or our nation or our countries together. Yeah, so we have these superordinate goals. Yeah, it's bigger than me. I'm part of this process, but ultimately, I'm motivated to help the greater good. And this is what transformation leaders are proposed to do. So transformational leadership, it's proposed to do this by focusing on the emotional component of leadership. So it's to try and arouse the emotions, the reason why these things are important, the inspiration, the emotional component of what's going on. They also create this compelling vision. Yeah, the vision is what ties it all together. Yeah, so you've got this vision in the future about what I can be or what we can be in 5 years' time. Yeah, and that vision is attainable, achievable, and exciting. Okay, we'll go on to that in a little bit. And that's a major driving force behind this motivational element down here. It makes followers more aware of the importance and value of tasks. So in this respect, it's about, a lot of things that really separate elite performance is about, we all love doing things we're good at. Yeah, that's just human nature. Yeah, we love doing that. But a lot of the times, we really need to work on the things we're not so good at. Yeah, we really, in order to get that full athlete, to get that full position, we really need to do the things that aren't so enjoyable. And these are the things that can sometimes make the difference. And so what a transformational leader will do, they'll explain that those small details are important in doing that process. Okay, it's the reason why it's important to do certain things that may not necessarily be enjoyable or actually may be quite painful to do. So it's about making the value and importance absolutely worthwhile. And then this is the final bit, activating higher order needs, the feeling of worth, competence, and relatedness, feeling that we're part of something. In Maslow's hierarchy, it's about feeling that we're actually part of some greater good, and, I feel valued, I feel worthwhile, and all those types of emotions. So this is just a very brief overview of it. There's a lot more to it, but I've just kind of skimmed the surface of it. We'll draw out more when we start going into examples of what's going on. And I've got a funny wee clip just now from YouTube that kind of gets at this a little bit. Okay, so it's quite American, and that kind of goes down in different ways, but I make a little bit of apologies for that, but it's that kind of idea about performance beyond expectations, about that effort and inspiration and those types of things there. It's not all about that, that's just kind of part of it, really. Okay, so this is just another way to do this in this slide here. This is essentially about transactional leadership is often described in relation to transformational. So transactional is essentially punishment reward. That's what we mean. There's a transaction in place. You do this, you get that. You don't do that, you don't get this. It's punishment reward, it's classic conditioning. Yeah, and it is important. Then the transformational leadership, again, it's just that investment of effort beyond the realization of reward and punishment. It doesn't replace reward and punishment. It's really important. Sometimes the reward and punishment gets put to the side, but we mustn't be scared of it. It's really important. Okay, it's very difficult to do right, but if it's done right, it's very effective. Yeah, but this is more about the bit that goes on that transactional foundation. The reward punishment, we set our goals, this is what's acceptable behavior in our team, in our squads. These are the rules. That's really important. We need boundaries. We need those expectations there. Sometimes in the literature, we'll see things about how much reward and punishment we should give. Yeah, and I don't know if you've come across, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe like the McDonald's sandwich, the positive feedback sandwich. I don't know. I've got other names for it, but I probably won't share them just now. But essentially, it's about giving reward, giving some sort of corrective feedback, then giving reward. So the meat's in the middle. Now, as a principle, that's okay. And I read about this in books and things, but there's no evidence that suggests that's how it should be done. Yeah, and this is just to be careful about being prescriptive about things. Yeah, it's a good principle to try and encourage more reward and more praise. It's always going to generate some good aspects of there. But what typically happens in that, when you use that process approach, is that the athlete knows, they know when they've messed up. They can see in the expression in your face that you've messed up. We can't hide that so much. And then when you're giving them a positive bit of feedback, they're like, yeah, but what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Yeah, and then they know that's coming. So if they guess or they realize that's just a process that you religiously use, then at that point, they're not really listening to that reward because they know the meat's coming. They know that they're getting some sort of corrective thing happening. Then they get a token gesture on the end there. But the principle's good about trying to encourage more reward and those sorts of things. But as soon as we follow a process, it's difficult. But today's and tomorrow's workshop isn't about reward, punishment, and how to do those aspects. It's definitely focusing on the transformational leadership. And from the research perspective, I've just selected some research studies from sport, okay? This is a few of them. I've been involved in a few of these. And essentially, what they do is they measure coaches' transformational behaviors, and I'm going to show you that in a minute, how we actually go about doing that. And we look to see, do these effects cross over into sport? Because we know in business, the more transformational you are, the more successful businesses are, the clearer the vision, the clearer the values and all those types of behaviors, the more successful and the happier business people are. So this is just, I'm not going to go through these in detail. It's just, they're available in the literature. But it's things like, the more transformational I am, the more intrinsic motivated athletes will be, and the higher the performance. This was done on college, Division I USA athletes. Then we've got effort and attendance. I think this was in Germany, Rowald. Group cohesion, player aggression, less player aggression, extra effort, intra-team communication, sacrifice and cohesion, and well-being and need satisfaction. So this is, I don't want to bore you with all this stuff, but it has emerging in sport that coaches who are rated as being more transformational by their athletes have much more positive outcomes in those athletes, okay? So this is a bit, hopefully, to try and connect with last year's theme on growth mindset. So on a little bit, Carol Dweck, popular, well, this is her theory, fantastic way to look at the world, and really quite simple and helps us to understand some basic elements of motivation and why some people put so much effort in and some people kind of shy away from that effort a little bit. Okay, and this is the way she proposed that there's two ways of looking at the world. Okay, we have what she calls the fixed mindset. So this means that talent is relatively fixed. Yeah, we're born with a certain amount of talent. We're either, we're not you can't really learn to be a great leader. You can't learn to be a great athlete. You can't learn languages. You can't learn to be a musician. You can't learn to kick a football. You know, you're pretty much, that talent is ingrained in you. And, you know, when people, that's it. And then at this point, effort is threatening, okay? Because if you have this fixed mindset, it's like, well, if I'm talented, it should be easy. I shouldn't have to work hard. You know, if it's about being talented, it's about having a gift, why should I have to work hard? Okay, so it's that fixed mentality. Things should come naturally. Then the alternative world is what Carol Dweck describes as a growth mindset. Okay, this is a belief about the world that people hold that actually, no, it's not about being talented. You're not born with a certain skill, a certain attribute. You're actually, it's more malleable. Okay, we cultivate this. Talent is through effort and instruction. Throughout our lives, we grow more smart, promotes taking challenges and resilience. Okay, effort is what makes us smarter. Okay, and there's a lot, I don't want to go over that too much because I think that was covered quite extensively last year. The one bit about this is it can be domain specific. So for example, before I came across this theory, I am musically, utterly, ridiculously untalented. Yeah, I have got no musical coordination in me whatsoever. And I always just said, well, it's just not a skill I have. But now from reading this work, it's more about, I realized, well, actually, if I'd worked hard at this when I was younger, I had been introduced to it, and I just did it more, I could have been talented because I should have worked harder at it. Yeah, and that's it. So, but then for fitness, it's very obvious to me that I've always been relatively good at sport. It's something I did a lot of, so I got quite good at it. So I had that relationship where talent and fitness was malleable, where certain aspects of the characteristics is fixed. So that's just the basic kind of bit in there. And essentially, a lot of Dweck's work, the simple message is that not all praise is equal. Yeah, so when we're praising, if we praise about ability, talented, and gifted, it's so hard not to do those situations. This is on, a lot of this research is on school and university level students, high school. But if you praise ability, talent, and gifted, it can encourage this fixed mindset. Whereas if effort is praised, then it's about this growth mindset. You can change it. They're malleable. You can show that they're different. So how does this relate to leadership? Okay. So in this bit here, there's no research been done that I'm aware of that's looked at transformational leadership and growth mindset, but we've got some work going on just now that if coaches hold a growth mindset, they'll have more transformational behaviors, which will then encourage athlete growth mindset. Okay, we haven't got any data on that. Well, we're collecting the data just now. Okay, 'cause it's an obvious place to work. If we're talking about youth and development and effort and hard work, then we can go in there. So the basic hypothesis is that talent is developed via hard work, praising hard work and effort. The athlete's self-statements that they'll say to themselves, the harder I work, the better I get. The alternative, if I have to work hard, I'm not very talented. Yeah, so it's that kind of process that we're going through. We haven't got any data on this as yet. Alternatively, athlete motivation is fixed. The athlete's either motivated or they're not. That person's just not motivated. Yeah, they don't have any motivation. It's fixed mindset. Whereas that person isn't motivated right now or could be motivated later. That's more of a growth mindset. Yeah, we can see people who we classify as talented at some point, but they don't necessarily put the effort into training. They don't necessarily do all those sort of behaviors that develop and build on that talent. Maybe because they've been told they're so talented. Maybe because they've been told that they're so talented, they're gifted, that they feel that they're talented, therefore they don't need to do that effort in that situation. So little impact to do it, then we have demotivated athletes. So I hope that kind of refreshes a little bit from last year and kind of ties it in a little bit in there. It's kind of in that situation. But this is really quite excited about this work just now. because we're thinking that, well, coaches who have a growth mindset will be more transformational, that will encourage athletes to have more of a growth mindset. Okay? It's not the be-all and end-all. It's just one small chunk of the big motivational puzzle. Yeah, it's just one little bit of this big motivational puzzle. Okay, so we've talked about what it does, a little bit of the research. Now we're going to talk about actually what it is. This is the research bit of it. How do we measure it? How do we know if you're transformational or not? The first place we go to is we go to the people that receive the leadership, that receive the coaching. Yeah, from one perspective, you know, when I'm reading, if I want to read about Alex Ferguson's management style, leadership style, I don't read his books so much. I'll read his athletes' books. So what we're doing some research just now. There's about, I think there's between 25 and 30 books that have been released of football players that have been led by Alex Ferguson. We're busy reading all those books and collating everything those people say about him, because that's the important bit. Yeah, it's the impact we have on the athletes. It's the impact we have on the people that we lead. Not so much the impact that we think we're having. I mean, that might be similar, it might not be. Okay, when we talk about self-awareness, that becomes important. So essentially, it's a set of 7 behaviors that have been delineated. This originates from Bass's research about to what extent, you know, what differentiated those great leaders from those average leaders. And they looked at, well, these are the 7 things that they typically did consistently. And we talk a little bit about each one. So the first one is inspirational motivation. So essentially, this is about developing and articulating a positive vision of the future, inspiring others to achieve that vision, and expressing belief in followers that they can achieve the vision. So this is the inspirational bit. This is the vision. This is, you know, the inspiring of others. But there's no point having this amazing vision if your athlete doesn't believe in it. Yeah, they need to be bought into that vision. It has to be part of them. So they need to actually buy into that process. So how do we measure this? This is an example item from the scale. So this is what the athlete gets. So one of the items, there's 5 items or 4 that measure this particular behavior. Inspires me to do the best I can. So this is my coach, inspires me to do the best I can. Okay, and they do not at all, sometimes fairly often. Okay, and it's a combination of 4 or 5 items and we get an average. Okay, appropriate role modeling. So the role models were very important. You know, if a coach or leader espouses or behaves the values that they espouse. Yeah, so if they're asking the athletes to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, they rock up at 7:45 in before that. They're setting that example of good, strong work ethics. Yeah, that role modeling of the behaviors. They're not getting the athletes to do one thing and we are doing the other thing. Yeah, it's about, we're in there, we're in the trenches with them, we're in there doing it with them. An example item, it's quite straightforward, is a good role model for me to follow. Yeah, and then there's 3 or 4 other items in there that we can use to measure that. So this is all your notes, so I'm just going through this real quickly. The third behavior is about promoting teamwork. It's about this, about bringing the team together. What makes us different? What makes us special? You know, what makes Swiss sport? What makes our skiing team? What makes your particular team different from all other teams? Yeah, what is it about us? Is it our work ethic? Is it our culture, our history? It's that kind of what ties us together. What makes us different and ultimately brings us together. So this is about my coach develops a strong team attitude and spirit among team members. And then we have individual consideration. So this is a behavior by the leader that recognizes individual differences and demonstrates concern for the development of followers. Okay, so this is behavior about, well, yeah, my coach really understands me. My coach knows that I like this type of behavior, or this is really an athlete-focused thing here. You know, it's about that, developing that relationship with the athletes. My coach actually understands me. So an example item, understands that I have different needs than others. You know, or am I just treated as one of the same from everything? Okay, intellectual stimulation. This is a little bit more tricky, but this is more about sort of experiential learning. This is about asking effective questions. So when you engage in, you get them to re-examine challenges and re-examine old problems in new ways. This is about, not give them, here's your problem, I trust you to solve it. You have the skill set, you've never done this before, but I trust you can go away and solve that problem. Yeah, and for the athlete, that's a hugely empowering situation, or for the follower, it's an empowering situation. It's a challenge, it's not easy, because they now have to solve it, but it's now their problem, and they now have ownership of it. So it's those types of things. Challenge me to think about problems in new ways. High performance expectations. This is given a little bit of a less influence than I particularly like in a lot of the theories. This is fundamental to high performance. I mean, you can't get elite performance without actually expecting 100% effort all the time. This is what we're about. We're about grafting. We're about putting the work in. We're about putting the effort in. Behavior by the leader that demonstrates his or her expectations for excellence in followers. This isn't a soft behavior. This is a hard, demanding side of elite sport, of leadership. Yeah, this is the challenging bit of it. Okay, will not settle for second best. Yeah, one of the items that we use to measure that. And then contingent reward, kind of transactional, but this is about praise, about acknowledging good work, about acknowledging effort. So I've went through them quite quickly, okay, but you've got them in your notes, and we're going to revisit them tomorrow and think about them in a bit more detail. Okay, so this is the vision support challenge model, because we have 7 behaviors there. This is, and I said at the start, one of the aims for me and for when I'm doing research is to make complex things more simple, so they're more usable in the applied world. That's what really excites me. I love doing research, and I love the applied world, but it's that interface between people actually doing this stuff, actually in the field. How does it look? How do we do more of it? So we simplified these 7 behaviors into 3 fundamental behaviors: vision, support, and challenge. Yeah, so this is pretty much a distillation of those 7 behaviors in there. Yeah, so some behaviors about creating this vision, some behaviors about really challenging your athletes, challenging the followers, and some are about supporting. On their own, each one isn't very effective, but all 3 together in comparably high levels is very effective. Okay, and that's what we see. So if you just support athletes or people, they'll be real happy, but they might not necessarily be high performing. Yeah, if you just challenge them, they'll probably perform very well, but they won't be very happy. So therefore, they might not perform for a very long time. They might get burnout and all those sorts of things in there. So it's important to have all 3 of those outcomes in there. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit about the All Blacks, a recent study that's come out that kind of used this distillation there with Graham Henry, the All Black, the New Zealand rugby coaches doing the research there. So then, can it be trained? So we've got all these studies that are there, and what's the point in having this great thing? It's just special people that do this. It's just gifted people or talented people that are transformational. So there's about, I think there's 6 research studies that have been done in the field that have looked at, okay, so let's cut this room in half, okay? So we'll work with you guys for, 4 months, 3 months, and we'll work on how to behave more transformationally in your particular context. These guys over here, they either get nothing or they get a placebo control, depending on which particular study we look at. And we see if there's any benefits from doing that. Yeah? And all these studies, so this was done with Canadian bank employees, Israeli Defense Forces. This was in Canada. We did this work. This is the work that we did with the Royal Marines. Bhushan Patel did it in teachers and educational settings. And then this is another study that we did with an infantry recruit training in the British Army. And it works, it pretty much pans out that it can be trained. So if you start at these levels, it can actually be trained, and you can get better at those behaviors. And I'll show you just a second. Oh, actually, have I got a slide missing? Yeah, this isn't coming up for some reason. I wonder what happened there. Anyway, so in here, so this slide here, I apologize. I think you might have it in your handouts. This slide here, have you got this slide? Yeah. So this is about, it's essentially, this is the measure that we use. And then, so basically, what we can do, we can measure actual coaches' behaviors as viewed by their athletes. So we can get a profile of each coach's transformational leadership as determined by the athletes. Now, when we're doing this, it's really, really important because especially when we're working in the military domains and in different situations, that this is used for developmental processes and not selection. Yeah, so if I'm working with a coach, I want to get a baseline. I want to know where they're at right now. So who better to ask than to ask their athletes? Yeah, so we give, if they've got 10 athletes, we give the questionnaires out, and we can get an average score for that coach in each behavior. Then as long as it's used in developmental purposes, then we go, okay, we've got a starting point. Let's see if we can improve those. And the advantage of this is there's no point working on an area that you're already very good at. Yeah, because if you're already very inspirational, well, there's no point helping in that particular point. So what we try and do with this information, we try and create a bespoke to your individual competencies. Yeah, and we'll talk about, this is going to be formed, the reason I went back to this slide is this is going to form the basis for tomorrow. Okay, when we're looking at your own competencies in those situations. Okay. Sorry, I thought I had a slide in there. So, a little bit of homework, so to speak. What we've got here, and before tomorrow's session, just at some point when you're milling around or you know, when you're out doing something, just want to think about your sport and your situation, okay? And think about an example of when you're doing inspiration or motivation. When would you do that? What does it look like? When did you last do it in your particular sport in terms of that behavior? When were you last role modeling? Role modeling is something that actually happens all the time. Yeah, it's just you. It's just, you can't get away from it. That's just us. It's just what the athlete sees every moment of every day when they're with you. And those types of things. So just at some point, if we can just sort of, you know, dwell on that for a little bit, and we'll pick those aspects up tomorrow, in tomorrow's session. Okay, so that's me done talking. Thank you for listening, and I'll take any questions that you might have.